Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, everyone watching via HTV or Facebook. Welcome to our first Housing and Community Affairs Committee meeting for the year 2021. We have a robust agenda. This morning, we will hear from our economic development team. We'll hear from single family division, our homeowners assistance program, and public services as normal, planning and grants management. And we'll also hear from our director, Tom McCaslin, regarding a series of updates and information. I'm sure you all would love to stay through the meeting to hear. Vice Chair, do you have any opening comments before we get started?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Glad you're with us, and I suppose feels a little late to wish you a Happy New Year, but glad we're underway, and I know this is going to be an exciting year for the City of Houston and our Housing Committee.
Yes, it will. And so as a reminder, and I also want to welcome Council Member Tarsha Jackson. She's replacing our colleague Jerry Davis on the committee. So as a reminder regarding questions, we're going to allow each section to complete their presentation, and then we'll open the floor for questions. I also want to acknowledge the council members that are joining this morning. I believe I saw Councilmember Peck is here, Councilmember Alcorn, and Councilmember Kamen, and I'm sure others will join throughout the program. Okay, so let's make good use of our time and get started. Now we will have our economic development presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year's. It's good to see you. Virtually is better than nothing. Thank you for having me today, and I'm here to follow up a conversation that we had a while back ago. We are pursuing our Economic Development Harvey program. I remind you that that consists of two sub-programs. One is for grants and one is a revolving loan fund. Today, I'm here to respectfully request your support for our decision regarding the loan fund, which we call the Dream Fund program. And we have chosen a CDFI vendor to be our partner to administer this program. So again, a little bit of background. Why are we doing this? Why are we pursuing this? We know that one of the impacts of Hurricane Harvey was towards the construction sector. And sometimes that is polemically interpreted as a positive impact in terms of the business opportunities that arose as the city rebuilds. But we do know statistically that the smaller construction firms, especially the micro enterprise size, which is our programmatic target, are really left out of the equation. And that's just because small business doesn't have the access to capital to take on some of the contracts that arise out of disaster settings, which typically are a little bit larger and require you to have that liquidity and those assets to perform well. And so we wanted to address that disparity. And in that sense, we want to set up a long-term solution to this impact, which is long-term as well. And that is a revolving loan fund. And so our vision is to have a resource that is an evergreen fund that is only going to be available to our very small construction businesses, with an emphasis on those owned by minorities and by women. We're very intentional in our design for that. And so today, what I'm respectfully requesting is your support of our selection of Lift Fund, which is actually not on this presentation, as we just made this selection after going through all the protocols with our procurement team. Of Lift Fund. And so we have chosen Lift Fund to help us to administer this program. And what that will entail is that they will work with us hand in hand for the intake process to review the eligibility, which is no small feat. As we all know, these federal dollars come with a lot of mandates about how they can be spent and on who. And so they will be well versed in how to make sure that all of that is well done and will be reported well and will be compliant. All the way down to, of course, underwriting of the loans, which they will be able to provide $150,000 in loans with up to $50,000 in lines of credit. And they will provide programmatic support. So one of the long-term visions for this program is that a small contractor comes into it and receives some business development mentorship and assistance, so that by the time that they're done with this loan, they're in a better position financially and organizationally to then approach the private sector and obtain some of those lending products that right now are a little bit difficult sometimes as an entryway. And so the component of LIFT Fund providing this business development is something that we really look forward to as part of this program. And we have full trust in our selection as they have been quite a presence in our post-disaster, both Harvey and COVID, small business development and resource provision here in Houston. And they are well known for their business development reach on a one-on-one level with their clients. We're also happy that their target market is in alignment with ours. Again, stressing that we support and seek to provide this service to micro enterprises. That means that it's a business owned by one person with up to 4 employees for a total of 5, and those owned by women and by minorities. The numbers, they're on this presentation. It's about $3 million to start the loan fund, and then the remainder is going to be to support an interest buy down component, because the research shows that even where small firms do have access to loan products, they can't afford them. The interest rates are prohibitive. And so we knew that if we wanted this to be a real resource, it needs to have a low interest rate. And so we support even up to 0%. And the remainder is for the programmatic support. Again, for that one-on-one time, the business development financials are key. And that's what we hope to embark on in a joint and fruitful relationship with LIFT Fund.
Wonderful. I don't see any questions in the queue, but I just want to, just to remind colleagues, they've essentially been working on this almost a year in terms of preparation and planning. It was one of our first meetings in the first quarter, talking about the program design and their intention behind the economic development relief regarding the funds from our disaster recovery. Thank you for sharing in terms of micro enterprise and scaling that, because often people say small business and that means different things to different people in different industry. And so thank you for sharing that. So if I don't see any questions in the queue, I appreciate LIFT Fund being a part of that project. LIFT Fund has a really strong footprint and reputation around doing this work. So I appreciate seeing them a part of this project. I don't see any other questions in the queue. Sherelle, am I clear? No questions?
No questions in the queue.
Wonderful. Vice Chair, are you clear?
All set, Madam Chair. Thank you. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Pineda, for your work on this.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that was easy. All right. All right, well, next up we have, I believe our single family is next.
Yeah, so good morning. My name is Derek Sellers. I'm Deputy Director in the Housing Community Development Department. A lot of our staff right now are in a HUD OIG fraud, waste, and abuse training. It's a 3-day training that we're doing. So I'm going to try to tackle this one today and see what kind of responses we can give to any questions that may come up. So for this agenda item, Housing Community Development Department will be requesting City Council approval of an ordinance authorizing the appropriation of $1,400,000 in tax increment reinvestment zone funds to the Houston Land Bank to acquire land that will be available to develop affordable housing via the New Home Development Program. These funds will support the mayor's priorities of increased single-family development in complete communities through strategic acquisition of large parcels of land that accommodate a larger number of homes. Thus far, the Houston Land Bank has closed on 9 properties, and it has an additional 3 properties under contract. and our staff are actively working with HLB to determine other properties that could be acquired with these funds. So in short, that concludes my presentation. On the screen, you see previous ordinances passed by City Council to appropriate funding to the Houston Land Bank. And so this is just additional funding for the same purpose.
Sure. There are no questions in the queue, but just again, for remembrance and context, a couple of weeks ago, we passed that bonding item that allows us to support 4 affordable housing projects. The land bank is one of those projects, that type of housing. And so this is one of our focuses for the next 3 years, is to develop that. And so the land acquisition is key to that. And I know several council members have expressed interest in having this type of model throughout in their area as well. So thank you, Mr. Sellers, for this work. It's and I know your team is in training, which they need to be. we need them to take care of that. Are there any questions in the queue regarding this item?
Chair, Sally Alcorn here.
Go ahead.
Just a comment, really. As everyone knows, and Director McCaslin, I monitor that TERS money like a hawk, and this is such a great use of TERS money. So thank you. This is a great program. I'm excited about it. Thanks, Chair, for bringing it forward.
It is. Wonderful. Thank you much.
All right, thank y'all.
Seems like we're moving quite along on this agenda. Next up, we have a disaster recovery updates. Well, our home assistance program. Are we ready?
I must have missed this item coming forward. It wasn't sent to me, so I don't know if that staff member was included in that training as well. For this item, what we'll be doing is appropriating an additional $1,026,000 to the Texas General Land Office to assist in the development of a 3rd bedroom for up to 54 properties. As y'all may be aware, recently, through negotiations, we have landed on a set amount of homes that the city will be overseeing or continue to oversee as part of our homeowner assistance program. The GLO will handle all remaining homes. We want to ensure that these 54 homeowners receive the same level of assistance that they would have received for the city if they would have come through our program. And so doing this will provide for them a 3rd bedroom as part of the GLO's program.
And let me just add a little bit onto that, if I may, Chair.
Sure.
These 54 homes were either families who were waiting for GLO approval at the point in which the GLO took over the HOPE program, or they were just about to be sent up. In other words, all their designs were done, and the construction documents were in place with that 3rd bedroom. And so we greatly appreciate the partnership with the GLO in this regard, rather than stripping them back to a 2-bedroom. Even though they have taken over this program, we are making the recommendation that we do go ahead and put the funding in place to ensure that they can be fully recovered. Our request to the GLO, of course, is to continue that process moving forward. But we have not received any communication from the GLO that they will do that. But we do think that at least for these 54 homeowners, it will be a benefit in terms of getting them fully recovered from Harvey.
Absolutely. And again, it's a wonderful use of those TERS dollars in order to make those families whole. And it's necessary, this is definitely necessary as we move forward with our single family development and just getting these families back on their feet. So thank you for that. This is a very strong recommendation.
I think we also covered, Madam Chair, in our briefing, we covered with the director that this was a very cost-efficient way to assist with that additional bedroom, and that the GLO, while the metrics are slightly different, this is going to be a good value for all involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, there are no questions in the queue about this item, so we will move on to the next presentation. Thank you. All right, Public Services. Is Assistant Director Melody Barr on?
Good morning. Yes,
Good morning.
I'm here. All right. So Public Services, item agenda 6A, search homeless services. The department is presenting before committee a second amendment to a subrecipient agreement in the amount of $750,000 between the City of Houston and Search Homeless Services for the administration and operation of a homeless services program. HCDD previously conducted a request for proposals, or NOFA, a notice of funding award, for public services agreements. Search was one of the agencies selected. This second amendment will extend their current agreement until February 28th, 2022. The initial contract period started in November 1st of 2018. We did a first amendment that extended through February 28, 2021. And then this one, as previously stated, will extend through February 28, 2022. This agreement provides funds for our mobile outreach program, which travels throughout Houston, providing interactions with those on the streets and other places not meant for human habitation, as well as the Welcome Center that engages clients to serve as an entry point or front door for a continuum of services that facilitates movement towards stabilized employment, housing, and self-sufficiency, as well as a case management program that specifically supports the individual placed in housing to continue their stability and ongoing work to rebuild their lives. Search has received funding through the City of Houston since 2000, and that concludes my presentation for this item. And
There's no
can I go to the next
in
one?
that item. You can go ahead and complete the rest, and then we'll come back to questions.
Great. Next item is item 6B, Houston Help Incorporated. And the department is presenting, again, a second amendment to the subrecipient agreement in the amount of $368,551 of HOPWA funds, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, to operate a 50-unit community residence for very low-income households affected by HIV and AIDS. This community residence offers permanent housing with support services. The support services include housing case management, child care vouchers for residents in need of daycare, and life skills training. Houston Help has received HOPWA funding from the city since 1998. Our next item is agenda item 6C, Volunteers of America, Texas Incorporated, and the department is presenting an ordinance authorizing a partial release of lien and amendments to the deed of trust, security agreement, and financing statement, First Amendment to the agreement and land use restriction, and First Amendment to memorandum of agreement and land use restriction. This is collectively a partial release and amendment between the City of Houston and Volunteers of America, Texas Incorporated to 1, partially release a portion of the property which were erroneously encumbered, and 2, correct a typographical error as to the corporate legal name of Volunteers of America, Texas Incorporated. In other words, this is a transactional amendment to correct errors in the documents that were recently discovered by Volunteers of America, Texas. The original agreement was written and executed in 1998, almost 23 years ago. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you much. I don't see any questions in the queue at this time. But so I want to raise one around item A. The search, those case management efforts. I know there's a lot of funding that we've initiated around preventing homelessness and those, presenting a certain way. So with COVID and homelessness showing up in a variety of districts, will their efforts reach outside of that traditional census count area that they would focus on?
Can you clarify for me when you say the traditional?
Sure. So remember when we did our homeless census count, and that count was done in certain pockets of the city. It wasn't done throughout the city, right? And so with COVID and individuals and families presenting homeless, or we've identified encampments throughout the area for solid waste to clean. Will these funds also support newly identified pockets where individuals and families are experiencing homelessness?
To answer your question, I need a little bit more time to get a thorough answer. But what I will say is that when we talk about case management and we talk about outreach specifically for these funds, it's done in collaboration with the Way Home system. And so what that means, generally speaking, is that there are some encampments that traditionally pop up in certain areas. And then there are encampments that just sort of pop up out of nowhere.
Right.
These outreach teams are then diverted based on that information.
Got
and
it.
so so to answer your question, the short response is yes, but I think
Sure.
that a real authentic, transparent answer, I would like to get with Tal Costas.
Sure.
Exactly on how those teams are deployed and what information is given to deploy them to specific areas.
Right. Sure. Okay. That's fine with me. Just I know that there are some encampments that have popped up. Can speak specifically to my area and that we've identified for certain type of support. And so just to make sure that these services are extended throughout, and then maybe, asking the question, is the amount enough? So that's helpful to me. Thank you very much.
I can answer that question. The amount is not enough.
It's not.
However, we are limited. These are entitlement funds, and we do pair a little bit of TERS money here. It's a very small amount to cover costs that are not otherwise covered through federal program.
Right.
I will say that we have worked really hard with our system partners to leverage as much funds as possible. But that was an easy one, so I definitely wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the amount. I'm like, this is not enough money. No, so I appreciate the response on that. So any follow-up, that would be helpful and I think beneficial to other council members, especially as encampments have popped up in neighborhoods, they might be able to identify for those teams. Okay, I don't see any other additional questions in the queue. Thank you very much for your presentation. We will move forward with planning and grants management.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For agenda item 7, the Housing and Community Development Department will be requesting City Council approval of an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 15, Article 1, Section 15-1, to create an exception to allow City of Houston employees to participate in certain city assistance programs available to the general public, such as the homeowner assistance programs that our department manages, when the employee otherwise meets the program's eligibility requirements. Many of the assistance programs require the program participants to enter into an agreement, such as a grant agreement or a forgivable loan with the city, which may conflict with current language. Additionally, the Housing and Community Development Department has implemented internal protocols to ensure that department staff are removed from the review and/or approval of any file in which a potential conflict is present. That concludes my presentation.
And if I could provide just a bit more context, Chair, this is something that with Kenesha London, who just gave the presentation, in our planning and grants management, and our legal team, we recognize could be a problem with the current code of ordinance. This is not a change from prior practice going back multiple administrations. City employees have generally participated in our programs, but we wanted to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and I just recently signed off on the new protocols for removing anyone from either their own or a close family member's review of files so that there is no conflict. That said, whether it's a disaster recovery program that is citywide, that is impacting many City of Houston employees, or a homebuyer assistance program where we actively want our city employees to be living in the city, we want them to be able to participate here. And this is similar to correcting the legal language back from 1998. This is making sure that our ducks are in a row and that we're not violating any local code or ordinance and not violating any HUD requirement as we move forward.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great opportunity, to your point, to encourage city employees to live within the city, for us to promote that the city has programs that they qualify for and that they can participate in. So thank you, Ms. London, for bringing this, presenting this very brief item. And I don't see any, Councilmember Kamen has a question regarding this item.
No question, Chair. I just want to, thank the team for bringing this and echo your sentiments. 22,000 employees in the city of Houston. And I think this is a really important step to make sure that a very large portion of our population has access to resources and the needs that other Houstonians have as well. So I look forward to supporting this and think it's a really important step in the right direction for city employees.
Thank you much. I agree. So I'm shocked that it's 10:25 and we're already at the director's comments. There's something suspicious about 2021. So this is a new trend with our committee. Director Tom McCaslin, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to take the first part of my time and comments to flag a couple of items that have been rapidly moving items that were not able to be put on the Housing Committee agenda, and so we'll be taking the opportunity to brief them. We already made reference to one of those items, and that is a new agreement with the GLO over our disaster recovery program. I won't go into the long history behind this, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. The short history that I just want to flag is that last fall, the GLO submitted and HUD did approve an action plan that zeroed out all of the City of Houston's funding for Disaster Recovery 17. As we flagged at the time, that would have put more than $1 billion of multifamily development at risk, as well as the economic program that was just presented on, our homebuyer assistance program, and many of the other activities that are not only ongoing, but performing exceedingly well. We are grateful that through ongoing collaboration and coordination with the state, Commissioner Bush and his staff, we have reached an agreement that we are making a recommendation on to City Council. What we are recommending is the approval of a new subrecipient agreement. What you see in front of you on the screen is the proposed budget. So you will recall that the original subrecipient agreement was $1.275 billion. This is a reduction, as you can see on the screen, but it is not a reduction to zero. It's a reduction to $835,087,000 and change. What is important there is to see the two primary areas that were reduced, which is your homeowner assistance program. That's where the bulk of the $444 million reduction came from. And then the single family development program that really took care of the balance. That reduction is not—
Hold on, Director. So hold on one second. Can everyone put your phones on mute, please? We're getting some feedback. Thank you much.
Thank you. That reduction is that $444 million will still be spent inside the city. This is not a move away from the City of Houston residents. It is continuing to stay within the city, and those efforts will remain in the city. It's just a matter of who will be running the home repair program moving forward. The GLO will be doing that. There is $82 million as we wrap up the homes and the reimbursements in our queue that will continue to move that forward. So the other two areas that I just want to flag budget-wise, of course, we saw a reduction on the administration cost. We were already operating at a 2.5% admin, and this admin was cut in more than half. And I just flag that because we will need money to administer these dollars. We will do our best to ensure that we stay within that budget for our administrative expenses, but that is an amount that is far lower than any other program we have previously administered. The other place where you saw—
And what was the previous amount before the new agreement?
$31,118,976. So just a little over 31 million. This is right at 15 million. So just under 50% reduction. And then the other area that was a reduction, and this is a reduction we actually requested, was in the small rental program. We had issued our notice of funding availability. We've made recommendations and are moving forward on the underwriting for $25 million of projects. And given that we had anticipated this as a one and done type of development, we moved the balance of that fund over into the multifamily rental program. So originally small rental was 66.7 million. It is now 25 million. Meanwhile, multifamily rental program increased by $100 million, right on the dot. Our home buyer assistance increased by $10 million. And our buyout increased by approximately almost $16 million. So increases in 3 programs, some significant decreases in those first 2, but this is a budget that we've landed on. So setting the budget aside, I just want to flag exactly what is going forward to City Council.
Yep.
It is the new subrecipient agreement between the state and the city. This subrecipient agreement, in order to become effective, will require the state to submit a new action plan to HUD and for HUD to approve that action plan. We anticipate that will happen sometime in the April or May time period. However, as part of the agreement, the GLO is planning to sign the subrecipient agreement and asking the city to sign it as well. That's why we're coming to City Council for the approval. It will be signed by both parties and ready to become effective as soon as HUD issues that action plan amendment approval. The last thing I will say, and we are deeply grateful for this, that in the interim, the state has agreed to provide a budget that, while it's not the full 835 million, it is a budget for, let me get back to, it's a budget for just over $600 million. That allows us to keep all of our ongoing contracts moving forward. In the next month, you're going to see, I believe it's 5 new multifamily development programs coming forward. In the next week or so, you'll see the first of several buyout developments coming forward. In order for us to bring them to City Council, we do have to have the budget authority for that. That budget authority remains. And we'll be able to continue all of the ongoing projects with a goal of having all of these programs closed out by August of 2024. We are on track to do that. And so this is a good step forward, brings us back into the position we should be in with the state as our partner, as opposed to being in an adversarial position with them. We're excited about getting back into the partnership mode, and you will be seeing this not this week, but February 3rd on City Council. So I'll pause there and answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Kamen has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair. And no surprise, Director, I have a question on homeowner assistance program, specifically reimbursement only. First, I just want to thank you and your entire team for your efforts working with our office and others to find a resolution with GLO to ensure that the reimbursement only program can move forward. As you know, this is something that significantly impacts my district. And I just wanted to ask about what the status of the reimbursement only program is, or what the final agreement came out on that. And additionally, if we could get an update, Chair, to committee members, obviously offline, but are we on track with reimbursement only? Are we seeking an extension from HUD currently, Director McCaslin, for some of the deadlines? And just any information you can provide in terms of drilling down on the reimbursement only program would be really helpful.
Certainly, and thank you for those questions. first off, on the budget, the 82 million and change that you see in the budget line item for the homeowner assistance program, that was increased by $10 million from 72 million to 82 million, specifically because of the efforts of you and other council members who really elevated this issue. So we're grateful for the work that this council did on that, flagging how important that work was to continue. And so at least $10 million of that will go out on future reimbursements. That will be the majority of the ongoing work that we're doing. We anticipate all of our construction work will likely be wrapped up by the middle of June. In fact, we will be in wind down mode in very short order on the construction piece of it, and all of our homeowner assistance efforts will be focused on the reimbursement side. As it relates to a request up to HUD, we are anticipating that early in February, most of the political appointees at HUD that do not need Senate confirmation will be in place. They're starting to come into place now. And so that will be the right timing to reach out, and as that new administration comes in, gets briefed on the issues, to flag whether or not there is any extension. This is something where we are entirely at HUD's in HUD's control, and so they have discretion on this. If they will allow an extension in terms of new applications coming in, we will certainly support that and can do it ongoing. I just want to be very clear, though, that if someone has already submitted an application, not a survey, but an application prior to December 31st of last year, those are the applications that we can move forward. We do not need any approval from HUD, and those are the ones that we're budgeting to pay out of that $10 million budget. And in terms of the update, Derek Sellers, who's on the phone, I'll just ask that we'll get a more detailed update so you can see exactly where the applications are in the pipeline and as they're moving forward. Again, almost all of our intake efforts is now focused on them because of the construction work being nearly wrapped up.
Fantastic, thank you. And I would be remiss like you if I didn't thank, GLO and Commissioner Bush for their openness and willingness to work with us to get this resolution for our residents. I think it's a win for everyone.
We're excited, and that was where we remained focused, and we appreciated the GLO remaining focused on ensuring that we did what was right for Houstonians. Right. And putting $1 billion of new long-term 40-year affordability at risk was not what was right. We're glad that we reached the resolution, and it's not possible without both parties coming together. So a big thank you to Commissioner Bush and the entire GLO team.
Yep.
And let me just say a big thank you to the legal team here. They do not get credit enough for the work. They are almost always called in a difficult situation, and they have worked tirelessly on this, led by Deirdre Penny, but many of her team members. So a big shout out to Deirdre Penny, the entire legal team that worked on it, as well as some of our outside attorneys. This was a joint effort. It was not simply something that two staff members sat down and worked out by themselves.
We always appreciate the legal team. And so you're absolutely right. Legal keeps us straight. So we definitely want to publicly acknowledge them. And in the follow-up, if you can include possibly the dashboard, which shows the tracking, I think that'll be helpful for colleagues to start digesting what that looks like so they can be aware of those processes.
Certainly.
Wonderful. Thank you much.
So unless there's any other questions,
No, there's nothing else in the queue regarding the subrecipient agreement.
Okay, I want to move then to just a update on rental assistance, and we are looking forward to Baker Ripley doing a presentation on the last round, but I know that they had a little bit more data to pull together, and so once that's pulled together, we are excited about presenting the results of that.
Yep.
just in broad terms, the first two rental assistance programs that happened in 2020 were very short turnarounds. They didn't have kind of the lead time that we normally have when we're working with HUD funds. HUD money, we usually get eyes on it fairly far out. We can start planning for it depending upon the source of funding. For the rental assistance last year, it was really about a week, and in some cases less than a week of planning, and then we were executing. With the COVID response bill that was signed into law by the president right before the end of last year, both the city and the county received, as well as the state, received rental assistance funding for its residents. It was on a formula basis. It was our percentage of the overall state population times 0.45 or 45% of that. That's how you got to the calculation of how much we received. Our amount was just over 70 million. And the county's amount is, I've been told, is just about 73 million. So between the two, for our region, about $143 million coming into play here. In addition, the TDHCA Texas Emergency Rental Assistance Program, I believe these were their CDBG COVID dollars that were coming through. We have eyes on another $5.8 million that's coming to us. And then there's an additional $2 million from the coronavirus CDBG COVID dollars that were longer term dollars than the Treasury dollars. So a total of $77.8 million is what we are budgeting for this current round on the city side. I referenced the county side because similar to what we started last year, we are working to be in closer alignment in terms of not only how we execute on the program, but the program requirements, and then what we were able to actually implement last time, which is a single point of entry where both county and city residents are coming together. This benefits city residents because, as everyone here knows, every city resident is also a county taxpayer. And so there are sometimes additional taxpayer money that can come to the city through the county sources, and we are greatly appreciative of our partnership there. So as we move forward, there's, I think most folks were aware of the streamlined process that we put in place. These have to be efficient dollars. They're going out in relatively small chunks. This is not a $200,000 home reconstruction. Our cap last time was $1,200 a month. You need to have a process that is appropriately streamlined for the amount of money folks are receiving, but also ensures that the checks and balances are in place. We believe that we hit that in a fairly significant way last year, knowing that in each round there were tweaks that we were making to improve on the process. The first and most important tweak was moving away from the first come, first serve. We did that in the second round. We have some prioritizations that we implemented, and then with the current money in place, there's additional prioritization that the federal government has asked us to do, focusing on individuals that are 50% area median income or less. And so that process of not doing first come, first serve, of once the tenant application portal is open, leaving it open, and then beginning to work through that list based upon vulnerability and income priority will remain the way we are moving forward. The other thing that we are moving away from, and that is the request for landlords, the additional imposition of eviction prevention requirements on non-assisted tenants. Last time when we set up our second round, it was before the CDC moratorium came out. The CDC moratorium actually largely preempted everything that we were planning to do locally, and we believe it is the better option. It has now been extended, and so we are leaning on that for the eviction protection. And so it will, as it relates to the landlords, operate very similarly to our first program. Landlords were asking that they will waive all late fees and all interest, so that we are only paying the principal amount of the rent that's due. And then that money gets sent directly to the landlord once the tenant has been qualified. As you've heard before, that gives the landlord just another and gives us another look to make sure that we are not overpaying for tenants, and we actually have recouped several $100,000 as a result of landlords saying, hey, actually this tenant does not owe this amount, and the money comes back to us. So the last thing I'll say, and this was something that we started in the direction of but didn't fully execute on in the second round, and that is allowing tenants who do not have qualifying landlords to participate. Right. The guidance from Treasury is that we need to work first with landlords. That is the primary option through which we need to be operating. In some ways, it looked like they were reading our playbook and asking us to follow it. But they also said that there is an option to go ahead and assist tenants directly. So in a case where a landlord will not participate with us, in other words, and they will not agree to waive interest and fees, and agree to the other fairly minimal requirements we have for those assisted tenants, we are going to be we'll still allow the tenant to apply, but that tenant will be receiving the money directly as opposed to the money going to the landlord. So good motivation for landlords and tenants to continue to be working together as they have throughout the process. The last thing I want to flag, and it's part of the budget that we have moving forward, is a real focus on case management. As we look at the eviction numbers, while they started off very low while the courts were closed in the early days of the pandemic, they have continued to creep up. And in conversations with the Houston Apartment Association, 90 to 95% of those eviction filings are purely financial. There's 5%, give or take, maybe a little bit more than that, that are filings that are due to something other than financial, maybe behavior that violates the lease, other than not paying rent. But by and large, those are financial filings, and we believe that those numbers need to come down immediately, and it is until they do, this rental assistance program is not, I'm not going to view us as being fully successful on this. And so Melody, who you heard from already, is working with nonprofits who already have either a geography or a group of clients that they're working with. But we're also looking for a couple of nonprofits who are particularly interested in case managing the eviction docket. The moment a filing goes up, they're making sure that they're talking to the landlords. And then we want the message out to the landlords to be loud and clear. You do not need to file an eviction to get assistance. Get your tenant over to us. If you need to make a referral, we're going to have avenues through nonprofits to make those referrals in, get that tenant in and qualified, and then we'll get the rent caught up. Our goal is to get the evictions back down to those early days of the pandemic when they were a fraction of what, 5-10% of what our normal process was. And working both on the legal side and on the case management side, we think we can get there. And talking to the Apartment Association, if we can get in, case manage, get the very simple application process filled out, and then within 30 minutes or an hour be able to make the determination, yes, this tenant qualifies, hand the landlord a letter and that says next time a payment goes out, you are on the list. This payment is going to qualify for this, or this landlord is going to, this tenant is going to get their rent paid plus possibly a forward month's rent paid. We believe that we can really make some progress on the eviction numbers. And that's what I'm hearing from the advocates that I'm talking to is this process has worked. It has helped a lot of people, but we're still missing people, and that's where the case management element is going to come in. Melody, anything else that I haven't touched on that you think is important before we just open it up to questions?
No, I think you've covered everything.
In terms of timing for council approval, you are going to be seeing something on city council tomorrow. And we apologize. The Treasury Department, we were not getting clear indication in terms of when the money was coming in. Money came in early last week. So we are on Wednesday accepting the money. Or you will be accepting the money or asked to accept the money, and then setting up all the financial documents for us to begin to bring the contracts to you. Our goal is to be able to begin to bring those contracts to you as early as the following Wednesday. It may slip to the next week, but working with our legal team, we will be doing everything we can to expedite this. We anticipate it will be a similar rollout process where the landlord portal will open. Landlords will have the opportunity to sign up as qualifying or participating landlords. And then a week or so later, the tenant portal will open. Again, our goal is to have this fully coordinated with the county so that if you live in the city, Fort Bend or Montgomery County or Harris County, or if you live within Harris County, it's a one-stop shop process. You can go there, get your needs met, and then get your rental assistance paid. The last thing I'll say in terms of timing, this program does run through the end of the year. We do not think that $70 million is enough to get us through the end of the year, but time will tell. 75% of this we need to have spent by the end of September. We are confident we can meet that goal. And hopefully, as the vaccine rolls out, folks will be getting back on their feet, getting back to their jobs, and the need for this rental assistance will dramatically decrease as we move through the year.
Wonderful. And so I have a few comments, particularly just for the committee. So one, in addition to Baker Ripley presenting, we also anticipate bringing the direct assistance update. And if you can remember, we initiated it, I think it was $28 million. Baker Ripley issued those checks to residents. So I want to keep in front of you that every landlord is not a member of the apartment association. So we're going to need your tremendous help in making sure that anyone who has a lease, that they're clear, that they qualify for this program. So our success at round 2 and having a broad reach and impact is because of your efforts of getting this out to community members. And I just want to underscore the importance of case management. So if families are housing insecure, we can assume that there's some food insecurity and there's some other resources that they need support around, and those case managers will be able to walk them through additional resources and opportunities once their rent is paid. Once we stabilize their housing, they'll be able to have some other things. So that's going to be a tremendous component to this program, and making sure Houstonians receive all of the resources available to them in a timely manner. So we'll need your continued support on that. And then I had one specific question to you, Director, and I blinked and I didn't write it down, so I'll have to come back to you.
That's fine. And while you're thinking about that, let me just pick up on your comments around case management and talk about the continuum that we are navigating for. The rental assistance program is really focused on those folks who were able to pay their rent. They may have been rent burdened. In fact, they may have been paying 40 or 50% of their rent on, or their income on rent prior to COVID, but they were still able to keep up on rent. That's where the bulk of this Treasury funds is really focused, is making sure that they can get caught back up on rent so that as the impact of COVID reduces, they can get back on their feet and move forward without eviction or moving into homelessness. And then you have the folks who are actually in the eviction process. And that's where, while we've done a good job of getting money out at the higher level, as I indicated, we have work to do as a region. And this is both on the county side and on the city side, because those eviction numbers are not, they span the city-county boundaries. We have work to do on the region, and so we think that a real focus on getting those evictions zeroed out or close to zeroed out is the big challenge of this round. And then you've got the folks who are evicted. They're living in their car, they're in a shelter, they're out on the street, they're doubled up with other family members in maybe an unsafe or unsustainable situation. And those folks, if they just hit that, they need rapid rehousing. Mm-hmm. And so one of the case management elements that we're wanting to do is make sure that all of the case managers know the resources throughout the system. So if they're in that first two categories, either just behind on rent or in the eviction process, getting them quickly into the Treasury dollars is the place to navigate. If they are further along the way in terms of housing instability, then they need to be navigated towards the homeless system. And there's a lot of money there, a lot of resources through the county city CHIP program that you've been briefed on, and that the city, this body has voted on. And so the goal around case management is true housing stability, regardless of whether the funding comes from. And this has to be throughout 2021, a community-wide effort as we move forward, making sure that we're getting that out. And so our goal here, working with our partners, is not, this is not going to be a task that Baker Ripley can do by themselves. No. This is not a task that Catholic Charities can do by themselves. It will require coming together from various nonprofits, making sure that the city, Baker Ripley, Catholic Charities, other of the larger organizations are communicating everything we need to communicate, and then collaborating throughout our entire system. So I appreciate your focus on the case management, and I just wanted to flag that continuum, because these are not the only dollars. This $77 million is just a portion of the money that is still there, still available. And this money is to ensure that we don't overwhelm our homeless agencies. If they are the backstop and we can't help folks earlier in the process, they will be overwhelmed. We have, we're seeing an uptick in on that regard. We have to catch folks before they were on the street, in shelters, or in their car. So just wanted to make sure that folks are getting a good picture of the overall funding that's available.
No, and it's perfect. And we have a comment from Vice Chair Robinson. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think it's a question more than a comment, but it is to build on what the director's reporting. And first of all, I'd like to comment the appreciation that I have for your navigation of these programs during the transition, both from 2020 to 2021, but through the administrative changes with the GLO, for instance, and certainly with the Consolidated Appropriations Act that came at the end of December last year. So the question I have is really more of a prospective one and looking forward. And I know how measured you are, how good you are at managing expectations, Director, but I wonder if you have anything that you might anticipate, or things that we as a city or a department are doing to anticipate new leadership in Washington, and what relationships we have there, or what you may have heard that you could share with us about going forward.
We were excited about the new administration coming in at HUD. as I've reported to this body before, not only did we see a significant loss of long-term capacity at the department, folks who knew how HUD ran, and I would say one of the significant losses was my predecessor, Neil Ratcliffe, who led this department at the city and then was assistant secretary for community planning and development at HUD. But he is just one example of many folks who left over the last 4 years, leaving certainly at the political level a hollowed out process, and at some of the senior staff levels below the political process, a hollowed out staff. I will say I'm deeply grateful for the staff who've stayed and have worked through with us over the last 4 years. But this is a real opportunity and a turning point for HUD as they rebuild that team, both at the political level and at the staff level. And believe me, I am staying in close contact with some of our prior HUD appointees, and making sure that as that team comes in, that not only are they hearing from us about best practices that can be working nationwide, but that we're hearing from them in terms of where things are headed. From a practical perspective, because those folks are not fully in place yet, and it will take them several weeks to get caught up. And then what I'm hearing in terms of the political appointees below the secretary level that will require Senate confirmation, and this is your deputy secretary, your assistant secretaries, folks like that. I don't anticipate those to be in place until late spring, early summer, so it will be some time before those folks are fully vetted and through the process. That's relatively a standard. If they come in a little earlier than that, that will be great. But what we're telling the team here is that we have in Houston, and certainly in our department, been lurching from disaster to disaster. And it is a mode that you can get in if you are not careful. And we are in a good position, having grown our team as a result of the disaster recovery funds. Seeing the $100 million bond funds, TERS funds come in for single family, of maintaining a very high level of execution. And we are going to be putting out 3 to 4 times the amount of money that we were putting out and funding 4 or 5 years ago. That is going to be an ongoing process, certainly through 2024. And just this program, the $70 million, $77 million that we are talking about, that Melody is overseeing, not too long ago would have been 90% of our entire spend for our department. And now it's a single program. So the message internally is staff up, get the capacity internally, because the current level of funding and the current level of need is going to remain. My expectation is that it's going to be there at least for the next 2 years, and it could be well beyond that. And just like we did last year with the rental assistance program, where we got our money out quickly, we became a national leader, and folks were calling us from California. And Melody, you've gotten calls from all over the country asking about these particular programs. That El Paso was on the phone trying to seeking guidance. We want to be at the forefront of how we move these dollars forward and how we work effectively with HUD or the Treasury Department or any other department willing to fund affordable homes for all Houstonians.
Director, that's a great answer, and I really appreciate the point you made about being careful not to lurch from one disaster to the next. They've had a habit of popping up somewhat regularly for us, so appreciate that, and planning and being as forward-looking as possible. Chair, with that, I yield, and thank you very much.
Wonderful. So I do remember my comment, Director, if you can talk about the possible legal support or funding, continuous legal funding to support those already in the eviction process.
Right now, we're still working through the budget, but we have $1.2 million budgeted either from the money is a bit fluid because you can pull from one funding source or another. So
Sure.
either from the COVID CDBG dollars or from the Treasury dollars, we're still working through the details of that. But the hotline that we have put on every one of our flyers for folks to call, that's a collaboration with Houston Volunteer Lawyers Association, Lone Star Legal Aid. Melody, who else is in that collaboration?
In terms of the eviction, the legal side, or all?
The legal side.
The legal side. So right now we're working with just those two. We are examining and we're having conversations. So I think that you're going to get more detail probably next week.
Sure, and I was just raising that for the just to remind colleagues. Round 2, we invested $500,000 to support those in that process, and that is still on the agenda and being considered to extend and have a deeper investment. So I'm sure all of that will be firmed up, but I think that's important to mention as well, as in addition to the case management, supporting those organizations to help with legal representation will be key to stabilizing these families as well. There are no other comments in the queue, and I am. Oh, go ahead.
I do have one more item to present on just for the director's report, but just on the legal side, I just want to flag the state is also funding this. We think that is a significant funding source, and so we hope that as they think through the process that they're funding into already established collaborations like the one with Lone Star Legal Aid and Houston Volunteer Lawyers Association. So I'm glad you flagged that. The last thing I wanted to present on, and it's tied back to what we just presented on, it's the emergency rental assistance. As you know, I take my ethics obligations very seriously. I want to make sure that there is never an opportunity. First, I'm not to make sure that I'm never violating any of my ethical obligations, but I also want to make sure that there's never an opportunity for folks to be creating a story when there is no ethical violation. And as I understand my obligations under the city legal rules, it is even more stringent. It is not simply to avoid a direct ethical violation, but also to avoid the appearance of an ethical violation. And so I want to be clear that my disclosure this morning is about making sure that you are clear that about a relationship that I'm going to describe to avoid even an appearance of an ethical violation. And that relates to Connective, a nonprofit that works closely with Baker Ripley. It works with a number of other nonprofits throughout the city. It was originally spun up through the Greater Houston Community Foundation. It is still a supporting agency of that organization, but is now spun off as a separate nonprofit. That organization is led by my wife, Elena White. And so they have worked with nonprofits that collaborate with the city. For example, during the HOPE program, they were sometimes working with Habitat to make sure that our folks had rental assistance while they were out of their home. In this case, with the emergency rental assistance program, they are providing some of the back-end support for the emails, the technology that allows for the efficiency to occur. But as it relates to any City of Houston funding, I've had a very clear agreement with any of our funded partners that no city taxpayer dollars will ever flow through to Connective. I recognize that that is a more stringent requirement than is normal, and that there is ways of doing this legally that would be less stringent than that, but to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. If Connective is ever involved in the work that we're doing, the benefit must flow back to the city. We'll take free resources, we'll take assistance, but the benefit cannot flow through to Connective, and in particular, no city dollars will flow back through Connective. That's how this has been run previously, because we are not in an emergency mode and we are thinking about how to run this program going forward, that is the agreement that we've reached with the nonprofits, particularly Baker Ripley and Catholic Charities and any others who will be cutting checks, that if they do work with Connective, and we are not the ones who can demand that or request that, but if they do, they cannot use funding that I've recommended and you all have voted on from the city to fund that. So I want to make abundantly clear that I've made that disclosure. I talked with the mayor about this last week, and he agreed that the best path forward is just to do the full disclosure to avoid any appearance of impropriety.
Right.
And I am happy to answer any questions you may have, but that sharp line rule will remain before any city taxpayer money flows through to Connective. I'll have to resign my job, and so that there is not that conflict is not there. So with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions, and then I do have just a 30-second update on a final report, and I'll be done.
No, we have no questions in the queue, so you can move forward with your final report if you like.
The last thing I want to flag, and I put a link to our multifamily page in the chat. I don't know if that can be shared with the public. But strong work moving forward on the multifamily side. Our web team has been doing a terrific job of keeping the photos of the current status updated. And so it's a great single location to go and look at the progress of the current 3,500 units that will be affordable for the next 40 years, mostly for folks at 30, 50, and 60% area median income. And so if I want to make sure that all the city council offices get that link, that the public gets that link, because it's a great way to see the work that you all have done as it moves forward. Kudos to the multifamily team and Ray Miller. And we'll keep those photos rolling in as more developments break ground and get under construction. But the good news is some of those first ones are getting close to being wrapped up. And so as that happens, we'll be updating you on that progress as well. And as these developments begin to lease, we'll be putting that information here also, so you can just go to a single website and be able to scroll through the now more than 30 developments that are either under construction or about to be coming forward to City Council.
That's great. And if possible, if there are any celebratory type of events, I know y'all had a remarkable ribbon cutting with the new grocery store on the north side in District B. So the committee could participate or be aware and promote that. I think it's important, as you mentioned, about going from disaster to disaster to disaster, for us to amplify that the city's housing department is continuously pushing other programs out and making an impact in the community. So that will be helpful for them to have that information and promote broadly as well. And I do see Jordan Thomas, as Councilmember Plummer's Chief of Staff, has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director, for your presentation. I want to touch on the subject we were talking about earlier. A recent study came out by one of the local nonprofits here in the city that studies housing. They've been observing courtroom proceedings in our JP courts, and they found that of their sample size, only 12% of those before the judge for eviction proceedings knew about the CDC moratorium. I heard you touch earlier, Director, on providing legal assistance, as the chair asked an update on. Is there anything else that we can do? Clearly, there are holes in the CDC moratorium. We've seen more than 21,000 people evicted since March in Harris County. 3,100 were evicted just last month. What else can we do to shore up what appears to be many holes in this moratorium?
Yeah, and I believe the numbers you're quoting are filings, not evictions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that. So a filing does not automatically lead to an eviction, although far too often it does. And that's where this case management piece, comes into play. And I want to be very clear that by case management, I don't mean litigation. I think there is an appropriate role for litigation and for the attorneys to be in there working, making sure that these tenants learn about the CDC moratorium. But as the numbers that you just presented show, that CDC moratorium is not doing the job we needed to do in our region. And so that's where the case management around the funding can help prevent those evictions. What we're asking for and what we're setting up is a line where a landlord, rather than filing an eviction, can call a case manager and say, I've got a tenant, they're behind on rent. If we can get them caught up, I'll keep them here. And so we can litigate all day long, but at the end of the day, the justices of the peace have some limitations on what they can and can't do. But if we can, before that comes to the judge, have a letter to the landlord and have a letter to the judge that says the tenant has now applied, we vetted them and they qualify, and in the next payment out, this tenant will be caught up on rent. That will happen within 5 days. We believe that with a really concerted effort, while the filings may not go down dramatically, we can dramatically reduce the evictions. And we hope that the filings will go down because the landlords recognize that their path forward to getting caught up on rent is to reach out to the case manager rather than pay the filing fee.
Right.
So that's the goal behind the strong case management. As you know, we weren't funded for case management in the first 2 rounds. While we are limited on case management in this round, we've actually added in some additional dollars, $2 million more dollars, to be able to expand that and to get it out into multiple nonprofits throughout the city. One of the things we're looking at, it was part of the presentation, the draft presentation that has been put together, is zip codes in areas where you have a high social vulnerability index. In other words, there's a need there, but based upon our understanding of the rental market there, we don't think we saw enough money going into those zip codes. And so we're using that as good data to identify which areas we need to be focused on, and then finding nonprofits who work in those areas that we'll be reaching out to and asking about whether they have capacity to do this kind of work. I appreciate you raising the issue. I appreciate the focus from the various organizations locally, and that's where this case management is going to have to step in and really start to reach those people who either aren't hearing about the CDC moratorium, don't know about the rental assistance, or have landlords who would rather file for eviction rather than direct their folks back to what has been an incredibly successful program in keeping people housed.
Right, and if I can add, the case management with these agencies, and what our intention is that throughout the city that they're playing an active role. So if families are presenting for direct assistance or food or whatnot, that these case managers can also work with them and assisting them around the CDC moratorium. And then with the apartment association, we've encouraged them that the education with their property managers is very key, right? So it's not always, the landlord that may not have the information. Sometimes it gets lost in translation. I've visited personally several apartment complexes where property managers have said, oh, well, we're not participating in that. Well, yes, you are, because it's a federal CDC moratorium. So there's a level of education that the case managers will be able to support us on the ground to make sure that everyone's on the same page to really interrupt some of those legal processes. So that's what our intention is. And we anticipate seeing those numbers decline. So that's the case managers to couple and to respond to that, to your very statement.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I don't want to be diminishing the legal side of it. There's a role to play for the litigation piece,
Sure,
for attorneys in the courtroom, but the public information piece is ongoing. And then we think that the piece that has been missing around this particular program has been that case management piece. And as we've done in every round, we are looking both at the successes, but also at the things that didn't work well. And so we'll be keeping a keen eye on that, making sure that we are hitting those targets. And one of my success points for this particular round is what happens to our evictions and how many of those who get filed against we're able to assist. So that will be one of the data points that we'll be tracking.
I don't see it. Oh, go ahead, Director.
Councilmember, I do appreciate your flagging the events. I didn't walk through the written report, but it is in your packet, and we've scrolled through that. There's photos from McKee City Living, just right there against Buffalo Bayou on the south side, right by McKee Street Bridge. I'm sorry, on the north side of the bayou, right across the bayou. It's under construction, and you can see it, a great view of downtown from that development. Is going to be butting up against the East River project. So a wonderful way of getting affordable homes in a place that we all know will be rapidly gentrifying. And as the picture in front of you shows, right next to a great walking and biking trail along the bayou. And then the market that you referenced in District B, the Tilo Market grand opening, several photos from that. We will do what we can as these ribbon cuttings come forward. One of the things that we are trying to be sensitive to is making sure that we are appropriately communicating. Lots of folks there. I think that was the largest gathering of people I've been at since COVID started. And so many of the ribbon cuttings that are happening now are happening either virtually, and we're sending that out when the video comes out, or if it does happen, it happens with a very small group of folks. So we understand that we're kind of walking a tightrope here, but anytime we do have a more public event, we'll be communicating that with your office.
Sure, and even for council members, just to promote within their newsletter and social media that this is happening, so people are aware. Oftentimes I don't. In my experience is that many people are unfamiliar with all of the programs the city offers, and this is just an excellent talking point for us to celebrate the hard work that often goes uncelebrated. So I appreciate you sharing in your update today.
That's great. And if you need any of these photos separate from the PDF format that they're in, we're happy, reach out to Eli, and we're happy to get those to your offices for inclusion in your letters.
Great. Well, that concludes comments in the queue. Director?
I have nothing else.
Okay, wonderful. Vice Chair, do you have any closing remarks before we conclude our meeting?
No, ma'am. Just the announcement for you about next month's meeting, I believe.
Yes, so stay tuned for February 16th. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one public comment. Please don't leave. We have one person scheduled for public comment, and we need to acknowledge them today. Hold on, let me get her name.
Miss Nakia Sims.
We have Nakia Sims. Are you ready?
Please press *6 to unmute.
Ms. Sims, are you with us?
Please press. There you go. Perfect. Now you're on.
Ms. Sims?
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. You're on.
Okay, thank you so much. So I appreciate all of y'all's effort and your time and just all the wonderful things that you do. I have unfortunately had behind the scenes experiences with the eviction process before the moratorium, before there was a diversion program. Just quite honestly, when most of the people in the courts, as even the precinct judge admittedly said, when they looked like public housing residents, when they looked like Black and brown women, there were not these concerted efforts to address evictions. Even City Councilman Travis Hover Slovak, the law firm of which he is at, was the law firm in 3 of my evictions, which I successfully contested. The reason I'm speaking to y'all is because, as the gentleman alluded to, it's the January advisors. They did the research with the housing stability, and one of the things that they didn't, it's in data analytics, is the unknown of the unknowns. So unfortunately, when there are people, and I'm sorry, I'm taking my daughter to the house trying to turn off it's the unknown of the unknown. So the questions that they don't ask because they don't have lived experience. When you have case managers, sometimes those case managers don't give you your dignity. I'm very familiar with the vulnerability index. I'm familiar with the processes when you go through the homeless, and often the rapid rehousing or temporary shelter, that's for Black and brown people, and permanent supportive housing, because the housing index, the vulnerability index, fails to account for a lot of things that are not done that leave out Black and brown people. Texas Housing Network has actually issued an RFP to address this racial inequity. When you talk about attorneys and having representation, that is very important. But UA Lewis, she spoke at the Harris County Democrats online. She spoke about the inequity even when you're hiring attorneys. So often you have Black and brown people who are evicted, and we know that economics is related to housing, intersectionality of race. And if we fail to address these things, the cycle will continue. So I ask that if you are putting resources into case managers, if you are putting resources into attorneys, please make sure that the hiring, the leadership practices do not support systemic racism, do not continue to have a disparate impact. And lastly, I would just like to leave you all with, once the ERAP was issued by the Treasury Department, the National Housing Law Project issued several recommendations, and that also included the importance of including people with lived experience, residents, tenants. And I just feel like from the places that I've gone and what I've read and I've seen, it seems like tenants that have actual lived experience are being left out in the conversation. And we do come with a wealth of resources, including, as we talk about GLOW, one of my classmates was appointed on GLOW. Although he's not in disaster, he's willing to help be a liaison so that we can get to the correct people with the disaster assistance. So I just hope that you all will consider those things, and thank you for your time.
No, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your comments. I want to remind everyone we do have a special called on 2-2. Isn't that 2-2, Sherelle? It's not 2-3.
2-3.
It's 2-3. So we have a special call meeting on 2-3, and so that agenda, that's regarding our 9% tax credits. And so please stand by for that. We'll have that to your calendars very soon. And then we have a joint Housing and Community Affairs and TTI meeting on February 16th, where we will discuss our single family rollout and the processes in place from permitting, public works, all of those good things. So vice chair, my vice chair who serves, also serves as chair of TTI. So this will be a robust conversation so we can make sure that those single family homes are built on time and we streamline our processes to get people in to those homes. So appreciate you sticking with us for an hour and a half. This is the shortest meeting we've ever had. So I want to appreciate all of you for your efforts. And we will be in touch within the next couple of weeks with some follow-up information that we received from follow-up requests that we received from this meeting. That concludes today's committee meeting. Thank you much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.